you need to help the person you talk to. That's the main thing in communication. You help people understand what you have in mind. Most of the time it starts with understanding it yourself, but then you help others. And when it doesn't work, well, that's a good illustration. That's a video for minute 30.
There's this door on the 10th floor of the Vox Media office that I hate so much.
God damn it. You ever get this door wrong?
Pretty regularly.
Have you seen people misuse it?
All the time, every day. Constantly. I hate this door.
Me too, Kelsey. But here's the thing. As soon as you start looking for confusing doors, they are everywhere.
It's push.
Why?
I feel like Roman Mars would know about this.
This is 99% Invisible, and those doors you hate are called Norman doors.
What's a Norman door?
Don Norman wrote the essential book about design. He is the Norman of the Norman door.
All right, and where is this guy?
You must go to San Diego.
Okay. Hi, Joe. Hey.
I'm Don Norman. It's hard to describe what I am.
Well, he's been a professor of psychology, professor of cognitive science, professor of computer science, a vice president of advanced technology at Apple. But for our purposes,
I was spending a year in England, and I got so frustrated with my inability to use the light switches and the water taps and the doors even, that I wrote this book.
If I continually get a door wrong, is it my fault?
No. In fact, if you continually get it wrong, it's a good, and if other people continually get it wrong, it's a good sign that it's a really bad door.
a Norman door is one where the design tells you to do the opposite of what you're actually supposed to do.
Okay, I will stop here, but the whole idea is that if most people do not get your message, it's not a problem of people. It's a problem of the message and the design of the message. 95% of the people I actually train, they tell me, first, they don't get it. I'm doing my job, they don't get it. But if no one gets it, it's a Norman door. We have a problem. You can read the book of Don Norman. You can also read these two books about how we think. This one is quite easy to read, Blink. It's maybe a bedtime reading. The other one, you need 2 months, not really easy. That's the latest advance in behavioral psychology. How to communicate with the general public? That was one of the questions I received. I think that's a really big obsession for anyone in communication, right? The general public. What is the general public first? Is that your butcher, the security guy at the hotel, your receptionist, and everyone in the room? Because we are all the general public potentially, 500 million people. That doesn't work. So you need to target first. And even with targeting, that's a very practical breakdown of how much it costs to reach the general public. Okay? So let's say you're very good. 0.5 euros to reach one person. You're really good already. It's more in the 2 euros in general. The production of all the things, the time you spend, and actually reaching people. So I want to reach 10,000 people, that's about 5,000 euros. That's very cheap. You have to have good guys with you, but that will be more or less what it costs. A journalist, what happens if you spend 5,000 euros of your time, mostly, organizing a field trip, inviting the journalist, sending emails, talking to him? Possibly, we had this morning Rock, 50,000 visitors a day on his website. You get maybe 20% of them over 2 or 3 days if the article stays on the page. Which one is more cost efficient for you? That's you to decide, but that's the whole idea. You don't talk to the general public directly because it would be extremely painful to do it. You try to find the best vehicle to that. And in this case, you have to choose what is the most cost efficient objective for you. I can't choose. Sometimes we are talking to lots of individuals via platforms like Facebook, like the rest, mostly via advertising, but that works in the same way. Another question I got is, if you mention the word strategy, the audience loses interest right away. But then again, if you do not mention the strategy at all, what do we have in the first place, right? Okay, who didn't see this series? Okay, 2, 3, oh no, my God, you're really a strange audience. Well, you heard about it. If you're a fan of Game of Thrones or you look at Game of Thrones sometimes, it doesn't mean that you want to know every little faction of Game of Thrones and the strategy beyond what they do, why they move, how they conquer the territory. Strategy is for people who really have an interest in strategy. You don't talk about the strategy of everything. Napoleon didn't talk about the strategy to all his soldiers. He was talking to his generals. He wasn't very good in strategy, but anyway, he didn't talk about it. Huh? This is your internal mechanic. Different audience have different needs, and sometimes a journalist will be interested in a strategy. Then you have everything already prepared. That's great. Another question, use of language. We use too many acronyms used by people in RMRS world, and it's not attractive and interesting for others. So should we use them or not, the acronyms? Well, same thing, the audience. If your audience understands the acronyms, use them. It's faster. Huh? If they don't use them. How do you know? You ask first. You ask. That's it. Another question, journalists don't have enough knowledge and authorities don't give them valuable information. I just showed a video, that's my answer. That's a Norman door. People don't get it, that's a Norman door. You need to rethink your strategy, you need to rethink your communication, you need insights, you need to understand who you're talking to. That's as easy as it is. How to make EU information interesting for an audience? Well, that's exactly what I said when I say insight. For any advertising professional, insight is like the cornerstone of everything we do. I can formulate it differently, the power of knowing someone. When you talk to your mom, to your friends, to your uncle, you know how to talk to that person because you know the person. When you send a message and the person only have 10 seconds to see it on a Facebook feed or read the title of a press release, you really need to know him well to understand how it's going to motivate him to do the rest. And you have 10 seconds, not more. Antonio, super interesting. I'm a radio host for the Italian-speaking community in Slovenia. If I can have someone speaking Italian over the phone, even a poor Italian, that's enough for me to consider a story. How did I know that? I asked him, what's your job? What can be helpful for you? I just look for people who talk Italian. Wow, there are plenty all around, okay? And you get all these audience for that. I asked the question. Mirella, be natural, don't try to sell me something. You try to sell a something Blom to Mirella, she doesn't want to take it. She wants to co-create with you. She wants to be there with you, building a story. That's not completely individual. Huh? That's very universal for most of the things we read. How to make a big effect with a small budget? That's a question every client have, obviously. I'm a working professional, so all my clients come, I don't have money. That's great. You actually come to the right door because we are using one thing, which is called creativity. That's the next step. That's after you ask the question, you understand something, you get an insight, then you can think how to trigger more attention with creativity. Creativity is earning media attention. There was a campaign for newspapers. The newspapers have a problem, in this case in Belgium. They don't sell enough advertising space. So they need to convince advertisers to spend money on newspapers. To convince them, they need to show that newspapers are actually capturing the attention of people, right? So they made a campaign for free people. Free, the target audience. I didn't do the campaign. It's Duval Guillaume, one of the most creative agencies 10 years ago in Belgium. They won every creative awards for a decade, and they are very good. So they build a campaign for 3 persons. Obviously, that's the idea of convincing more advertisers to spend money. The whole thing, they knew the advertisers would read your newspaper. That's a stupid insight, but that was working for them. Communication is a profession in an industry that is far larger than you think, okay? I usually comment a little bit more on that, but I don't have much time. We are talking about $500 billion industry. It's larger than the 3 most important entertainment industry in the world, which are film, music, and video games. It's larger than that. There are plenty of professionals, and we are actually competing against these people. The great thing, if you need to learn about it, it's absolutely not new. This is an image in Pompeii, 1st century, that says basically if you buy 2 wines of wine, you get 1 free. It's happy hour 2,000 years ago. Huh?
It's not really happy.
Yeah, you have to leave the bar quickly after that. There are plenty of books, of techniques, of lectures online to understand everything about the tools, the tactics you can use, but the whole thing is you're talking to people. So how much do I know about people? So basically, to sum up, start with what you know. Don't get crazy with what you don't know. Start with what you still can't explain well. If you can't explain well, it's basically because you don't understand it well. So if you can work on that, everything becomes clearer. And the last thing, start with the questions. We all assume we understand people. We never understand people. I don't understand you. You don't understand me. But if I ask questions, at least I understand a little bit better. And that's what we are doing with this sort of conferences, because someone had a great idea of mixing journalists and people communicating in the same room for 3 days. So that's the moment to help us, each other. We have to be helpful for each other, because that's not a journalist. That's a stereotype of a journalist, that's a stock image from Shutterstock. The actual journalists are in the room. The ones who are passionate about the project, European project, want to hear about macro regions. That's not an easy topic, and you need to be very passionate. What I give you, a questionnaire in Word format, all the questions I've used. I also give you this excellent article, How to Write an Effective Press Release, by the guy who actually received them. That's quite useful. I had a last question, and this is the last thing I can help you with. There is a lack of content to communicate about macro-region strategies. There's never a lack of content. There's a little bit of lack of imagination and techniques to generate ideas. I'm going to show you a campaign where they had nothing to say. And you will see that it's quite well done to attract attention. But what I will ask you, or propose you mostly, is that I'm very good at organizing brainstorming sessions and passing a very, very efficient technique of brainstorming. Like efficient, I'm talking about in 10 minutes, you generate a minimum of 20 ideas. So if people struggle with their actual project, I think it's tonight the deadline, I will be there, okay? I teach you the actual brainstorming technique. In 15 minutes, 20 minutes, you can radically change the way you think. I'm not kidding. So, about this hotel that says nothing about everything.
Welcome to the Hans Brinker Budget Hotel, Amsterdam. A hotel whose lack of services and features makes it the most accidentally eco-friendly hotel on the planet. This eco-commitment begins in the lobby. To lessen our impact on the environment, staff do as little as possible for guests. An eco-elevator ensures that the only energy spent going to the room is your own. Take a look around the Hans Brinker Eco Suite. To conserve space and energy, up to 7 guests can sleep in a single room. Telephone and 24-hour room service, minibar, satellite TV, just a few expenses our hotel is prepared to avoid to save our planet. Eco lighting, yet another feature. Every suite comes with a carbon-neutral eco-climate control system. It's also easy to use. Guest bathrooms are a celebration of cleanliness and eco-friendliness. Refresh yourself with our range of eco-toiletries and the eco-shower. We also ask you, the guest, to help honor our eco-commitment. Leave the towel on the rack we won't wash it. Throw the towel on the floor, we still won't wash it. Let's visit the bar, where a committed staff serves eco-drinks. After your drink, sample authentic eco-cuisine specialities. Or simply relax in our eco-courtyard, solar heated when the sun is out. Additional amenities that have been disregarded in favor of the planet include state-of-the-art gymnasium and full-service spa. The Hans Brinker Budget Hotel is committed to doing as little as possible to accidentally help our planet as much as possible. Welcome to the Hans Brinker Budget Hotel, Amsterdam. Accidentally eco-friendly.
As one of the most successful hotels in Amsterdam. Thank you very much. Do not hesitate to take my email address because I always answer emails. You have a question, I always answer questions, even 4 years later. Huh? No, really. Oh yeah, I changed. It's talking about great things that make me younger. And if someone wants to benefit of the brainstorming session, I will be there after the end of our day. And we take half an hour, you will see it's very changing, life-changing, I would say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlelie, for, I don't know what to say, quick guide, cooking material, putting us to the belief that we could do that, only if we ask questions. So, I hope I did learn something from you, so I would like now to ask two guys to help us with the conclusions. So, I would like to invite Mr. Jean-Pierre Halkin, the head of the macro-regional strategies center of a competence center, DG Regio, to help me conclude together with, it was supposed to be Marko Milosavljević, the keynote speaker from yesterday, but he has delegated the system to Mr. Mitja Meršol, who will be our guest tomorrow. So if you join us here too, what have you learned in these 2 days? What is what you think you could use in our future common work? And what would you like to tell the survivors at the end? Please.
Thank you very much, Andreja. First of all, I would like to say that I really have learned a lot, a tremendous lot, and I even feel more intelligent. Because if I am at the head of a competence center, it does not mean that I'm competent myself, but today and yesterday's presentation made were really, really useful. And the second thing I have learned also is about how much work is already done on communication for macro-regional strategy. And this is something which is very encouraging, and I would like really to applaud, to congratulate all the persons who are already working on communication. We also learned about tips and things we need to pay attention to whenever we are speaking about communication. And the summary presented by Jourdan was also extremely useful for someone like me to have a global view, the global picture we need. And this is really helping me also to see what we can do further in the future. Certainly there is more work to be done, and if we were not all convinced that there was not more work to be done, we would not be here. Someone used the word low-hanging fruit, and I believe it was Jourdan who used it, and indeed there are some low-hanging fruit that we must eat immediately. And I will just use one, which is to work together, all the strategies and the Commission, on some concept definition. Today, in my daily work, where we prepare loads of briefings, which are never landing or having the right impact maybe to the press, we are still struggling to define what a macro-regional strategy is. And there, as it was said, we need to have a message which is sharp, simple, and a single message that we repeat again and again on what a macro-regional strategy is. And agreeing on that would be tremendously useful. What is the process also to set it up? We heard that the process to define a strategy has its own use, its own benefit, but if we would define it better, it would be extremely useful for our own communication. Then certainly we know, and I will come to the two last points on communication, which are dedicated to the audience. We heard that strategies are bottom-up process. And indeed, this is for me one of the most valuable aspects of the strategies. We have not decided in Brussels of what the regions which are surrounding the Baltic Sea, which are on the river basin of the Danube, which are in the Alps, which are around the Adriatic and Ionian Sea, what they need. It was decided and designed by the regions themselves. That's really, really an asset. And so it's very important by accountability that we are able to communicate to all the stakeholders who are involved into that, certainly politicians, decision makers, and we have some in the room, but also civil society, citizens, young people, about what we do. And we've been discussing about that, and this is something which is extremely important, and I see that you have many ideas on that. Where I believe from my past experience I can provide you also more guidance, it is on a topic that was a bit less discussed. It is the Brussels bubble. If we are here today, it's because the person working on the macro-regional strategies decided that there was the need to have more communication. And I really would like to thank Andreja also for organizing this with her team. But we would not be here should the EU would not have been supporting financially and politically the emergence of the strategies. And this is not at all a bottom-up process. This is a totally top-down process. So speaking to the Brussels bubble is very important, because if we don't have any more EU support to the strategies, there will be no strategies. And we were invited, whenever speaking to an audience or a constituency, also to look at future debates. And in Brussels today, the future debate is called post-2020. And I believe we need to take that into account. It was already raised by Dana, notably. What do we have on the radar screen for post-2020? We have many things which are changing. First, the Brexit is there with a net contributor leaving. And then we have new priorities arriving. Security, migration, defense, the need to have a fund to protect the European currency against some risk. We don't want to have to rely anymore on the bailout provided by IMF. We don't want to have to go and ask the Chinese to give us a loan. We would like to be self-sufficient. Those are top priorities, and we can be sure that they will make it up to the budget. Just as a point of comparison, do you know that you are working for a policy which has been a killer? We like to see social cohesion as the policy of the fringe, the nice policy. But in 2006, when the budget was discussed, there was a strong consensus that with the new member states arriving, we needed to boost, in particular, the cohesion policy. In order to do that, without increasing drastically the EU budget, we had to make cuts. And I was in a policy where cuts were made. And guess what? What did we sacrifice? And you may think that people there were believing it will never happen to me. We were discussing about uprooted people who had a special program to address the issues of migrants. This went overboard. We had a special program which we are very ambitious to protect forests and also improve or increase our resilience to climate change. It went overboard. We had a program to prevent weapons trafficking from and to Europe. Overboard also, because when we need to enter new policies, then we need to cut branches. We need to see that we are exposed to risk. So we really need to communicate in Brussels in a very affirmative way. And I can tell you that in 2006, the people working on forest, weapons, migrant, were believing, Jean-Pierre, the problem is so big, I was really quite, involved in the process, that we will still be there forever. No one is there forever. But we need to communicate on what we do. We have a very solid product. And certainly, if we speak about the way to communicate, something very important was brought. You don't speak in Brussels by coming yourself to speak to the Council or to the Parliament. We need to use the messengers. What was the third parties mentioned? By Dana mentioned the third party who can be used. We have think tanks, we have some MEPs who are particularly active, who are working in areas which are so important, like water, for instance. Water is very important. Civil society pays a lot of attention. So we need to find all the channels to convey messages to Brussels. But we need to convey a very strong and unique message about the strategies, that they are working, delivering, but it is like growing a tree. I mean, you need to wait some time for the tree to be grown up. So we need also to fine-tune the message to Brussels, who are there to do that. And this is also something extremely important to us. So for me, one of the messages we need to work very hard is how can we work for the specific needs of the Brussels bubble. That's something very important. You were speaking about doing the right things, and here also doing the things right is very important. Something we cannot afford is fragmentation in the message. And for that, we also need to listen to what is being discussed in Brussels. Who has listened to the speech of President Juncker? Good. You are 3, I see. 4. Now, it's very important to listen to the speech of President Juncker, but also read Council conclusion on social cohesion, on macro-regional strategies, to see where the budget authority wants to go. Because if we say that we've heard them and we are partially answering their expectation, it's already a good start to engage. They are very important and they feel very important. I am looking at our expert in communication, but it's also recognizing the role of the person is very important. So this is something where I encourage you to, all of us. I would not want to close my intervention by sounding too pessimistic. My feeling is that we have an exceptional product. Inviting citizens or allowing citizens of different regions, of different countries, within the European Union, outside of the European Union, to work together to address a challenge collectively is certainly one of the highest added European value we can think about. And I'm convinced that if macro-regional strategies would not exist today, and we had to create a new policy to support, for instance, the management of the water of the Danube River basin, we would have to recreate something which would be very much looking like the strategies, except that we would be 10 years behind. So we have really an exceptional product, but we need to make all efforts we can to valorize it and to sell it into Brussels. That's for me a very big achievement, not at the detriment of selling it to the citizens, to the local politicians, but we need to be sure that whenever someone goes to Brussels, he has a ready-to-use message that he can repeat. Because at the end, I have been quite a long time in Brussels, quite a long time in also financial framework preparation. Having the same message being repeated again and again is working. And some people also are always repeating the last message they are hearing. So if you say it once, it has little chance to be the last one. So we have a good product, we have tremendously committed people, and I must say that coming to DG Regio, it is something which is striking. We have also extremely committed people outside and inside the Commission, and we need to capitalize on that. So that's really my lessons that I learned from those 2 days. And I really would say that the timeliness and the relevance of the topic discussed during those 2 days is exceptional. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, it was not intended. It was.
Mitja, you are the synonym of journalism in Slovenia. You were the guy who first approached me 2 years ago and said, look, you deal with the macro-regional strategies, why don't you organize a conference on media? I said, forget it. We are in a presidency of the EUSAIR, we don't have time. Maybe next year. Now we are here. So, what did you learn? What did you find out? How do you feel?
Dear Andreja, thank you so much for these very kind and historic words about my role in this. But let me tell you that when we mentioned, I think the first day of our discussion, when we mentioned the BBC and its radio news in the 30s, which said, there is no news today. But I do have a good news for all of you today, which is that we are going to have a very nice weather tomorrow, and we are going to have a very nice and very positive boat trip tomorrow. And we'll discuss on a boat quite a lot of good and positive things. Now, what I learned in these two-day discussions is that I know a little bit more about strategy, which is nothing without implementation. I learned a lot about implementation because this conference proved to be a good start for implementation of macro-region strategy in communication. And also, I think that communication has proved to be a very useful and positive among us and a good guidance for us for the future, how to do this, how to do networking, socializing with no free lunch, and to go on with our project. I think that we really discovered some things, but we often talked about journalists who are missing, how to attract them, to activate them, to be part of our project and so on. And I've been thinking about journalists when you were talking about social media and you mixed up journalists and all those who are writing in social media and so on. And I said to myself, my goodness, it's like being at school and you mix up pupils and teachers are for some time pupils, and pupils are teachers, and teachers are pupils, and so on. So it's like in social media, because they are not all journalists there, but they call them writers, journalists, and so on, which is not correct. Anyway, Marko Milosavljević, my dear friend, Professor Marko Milosavljević, is coming from Ljubljana, but as all professors, he's a little bit late, you know, and he asked me to maybe to say a few words on behalf of his keynote speech that he had yesterday, and and that's the answer, about journalists. I think that Marko said that active policy of European Union should answer one single question: how to activate journalists in our macro-regional project. The answer is by financing and enabling employment of journalists in local and national media by special foundation, with which should be put away a gap created in media market nowadays, and education of young and also elder journalists. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow on a boat. And thank you, Andreja, again for organizing this event.
Thank you both. But see you first today in the Championship League in the evening, after you have passed the speedlight brainstorming session. So it is my honor to conclude this formal part, which we actually are really approaching. Sorry, I need help. I know that many things has happened. We have asked many questions. We learned a lot of things. I've just learned from Charlelie that what we will be asked, and Jean-Pierre was referring for the future, what we'll be asked in the future is actually to do much more with less. And this is not only within the European budget. I mean, it's for everything. And I firmly believe that we could do that. in a sense of the implementation of European policies. How? With the macro-regional strategies. Because by a collaboration, we identify the issues, the topics which are of strategic relevance to the people living in a certain territory, and we are doing this together. We do this in the things that have the impact. So we can save a number or a lot of money for not doing non-relevant things. But for a formal conclusion, I need to say that last year during this kind of event, during the stakeholders conference, so we had a number of stakeholders. One of the proposals, we prepared 4 recommendations for the better governance of macro-regional strategies, and one was dealing with the communication. And it said to create a single horizontal pillar for all 4 macro-regional strategies, the media and communication pillar. It's easy to say, it's more difficult to do, so we volunteered in Slovenia, said, okay, we volunteer to put together the first kind of a meeting where we invite all 4 communication responsible people together so that they can meet as they did today. But we would also like to bring the 2 words together, the media and macro-regional, so that we can know each other, ask questions, understand each other, and move forward. But we also asked the professionals, the experts, are we doing the right work? And this is what Jourdan was really explaining us today. And all the intention was to increase the visibility of macro-regional strategies. And the experts' proposal is we have to work on 3 levels: on a common content, on a participative process, and innovative tools. And the techniques. Yes. So it was actually this year that we said we need to do 2 things. First, to do the right thing. And there have been a number of things that give us sufficient belief that we are close to defining the right thing. Haven't done that yet, but we are approaching. But once we define the right thing, we also have to do it right. So it's a question for the next year. We have a proposal, but the question is, shall we do it? I cannot say we will do it. It's actually us. Shall we do it? We said it has to be a little bit professionalism in what we're doing. So the question is, who could do it? Do we know? Do we have faith? Charlelie said, faith. We need to have personal somebody. And how to organize ourselves. So these are the questions which are left to be answered. So our proposal as a host is actually that we formulate a proposal like last year, share it among the participating countries and regions in all 4 macro-regional strategies and with the European Union institutions, and it is that the macro-regional strategies high-level group, which is the highest political setup responsible for looking and overviewing what is going on in macro-regional strategies, should invite, based on our recommendations, for all 4 macro-regional strategies, the actors responsible for the governance, us, number of them, and communication, to act in line with those recommendations. Of course, if they are adopted, to invite the European Commission to further support the improvement of the macro-regional strategy visibility and communication. And as we said, we would like to meet again, to start the process, participative, that we from time to time meet, discuss, and evaluate whether we are doing the right thing and whether we are still doing the right thing in the right manner. So if you agree with that approach, we will do it, but we will be successful only if you will be sharing and conveying the same message in your individual manner, designed for your individual specific environments that you're dealing with. Thank you. Can I consider the recommendations in this form accepted? Thank you. And now, the final words. First of all, sincere thanks to the European Commission. Because without the European Commission support, and when saying support, it's tangible support, it's financial support, we would not be able to realize and bring this conference to the truth. I would also like to thank our colleagues from the Government Office for Development and European Cohesion Policy, with their significant efforts and helps in organizing and acting also as a facility point of the Adriatic-Ionian strategy, also financially participating in the realization of this conference. I would also like to thank the Alpine Strategy and Action Group number 7, I like it, it's environment, but they do understand the abbreviations, so I can say AGL7. Thank you very much. And also the Alpine Strategy project did collaborate and also did finance a little bit. You see, we are making synergies, it's possible. And in particular, I would like to thank our colleagues that were acting as our local provider from the Regional Development Agency of Posavje. With all of you, we were able to bring this conference to true, and the most sincere thanks goes to you. Because without you being here with us on a sunny day, spending your whole 2 days kept in this room, we would never made it. Thank you very much, and see you at the dinner.